And I did the interview, and I'm like, oh, I aced the case. And I get a phone call, and he said, hey, we're declining you. Would you like some feedback? I was like, yeah, sure. He said, you told us in the interview you had no plans to stay at the company longer than a couple of years.
You're like, yeah, I'm being honest.
Yeah, they're like, what's your vision for yourself the next 2 years? Start a business. What about 5 years? Like, have a bigger business. 10 years, have a bigger business. And so he's like, you probably, if you're trying to get a job, you probably shouldn't tell your employer that. And I was like, sorry, I was just being honest.
When you're driven, the need to accomplish a goal is relentless. Hard work and ambition compel you to do whatever's necessary. In my work as a personal injury trial lawyer for 18 years, it's common to meet driven people. Those with drive can have different personalities, careers, or backgrounds, but they possess one common factor. Despite their passions, driven people want to surround and motivate themselves with other driven people. If you want to learn how to overcome obstacles by learning from others, then tune in here. This is the Driven Crowd Podcast.
Thank you for tuning into episode 38 of the Driven Crowd Podcast, fueled by Snellings Law. I'm your host, Scott Snellings. Today, we're excited to welcome our guest, Ben Davis. Ben is the dynamic host of Untrapped Entrepreneur podcast and a seasoned serial entrepreneur who has built multiple 7- and 8-figure businesses, ranging from retail and healthcare to personal care. He's attracted world-class investors to his companies, including Dallas Cowboys owner Jerry Jones and Hall of Famer Emmitt Smith. Through his podcast, Ben creates a space for authentic conversation and learning, shedding light on the less talked about aspects of entrepreneurship, and inviting listeners to explore the true essence of being an entrepreneur. Ben, welcome to the Driven Crowd Podcast.
Thanks for having me.
That is quite the intro, and you put several tongue twisters in there, or Aaron did.
I was trying to trip you up. So.
You did. You succeeded.
All right, good.
But we're gonna go with it. I'm not gonna re-record that because
man.
at the end of the day, man, I talk over myself all the time, and we'd be here forever.
That's the most authentic way to do it, too. So
exactly.
I'm on board with that.
All right. So you are a podcast host.
I am.
How has that been for you to this point?
Well, I just started it, so I'm behind you in experience for sure. But no, we just finished season 1, and we were talking to entrepreneurs who were willing to just tell the truth about entrepreneurship. So I didn't want to have like here's how you buy the Ferrari or 3 keys to success. I'm like, tell me about the traps and the problems. It was great. Season 2 is about being married and owning a business. And so we go like deep into that one trap. And so that is forthcoming. But yeah, some really interesting stuff there. I've recorded a few episodes, and I think it'll be really helpful.
So it's funny. Everybody has a podcast these days, right? Or it certainly seems that way.
Yeah.
What was the hardest thing that you didn't see coming about recording a podcast?
I think getting guests to book. So I have a huge network. I know all of these entrepreneurs. Like I hang with these guys. I'm in networking groups, all of this stuff. Been doing it a while. And I thought, hey, I'm just going to text someone and say, hey, you're going to come on my podcast, right?
Yeah.
And so it's like, oh man, I'm getting married. There's a baby. I'm going out of town for a month. And I'm like, dude, are you serious?
Yeah.
You're supposed to say yes and like do it tomorrow for me. And so I had to temper my expectations a little bit. But yeah, just booking the people and navigating a busy entrepreneur schedule because it's exclusively entrepreneurs. And I guess I should have known better. If someone asked me to do something. It took me like a month longer to get on your show than I wanted.
Yeah,
but
we ended up getting you scheduled, and then lightning struck the studio the night before for the first one. So we ended up having to reschedule, 3 months later. But yeah, dealing with entrepreneurs is tough, right?
Mm-hmm.
Just getting them to focus on something for any amount of time, much less like getting on their calendar.
Yeah,
that's rough. You picked a rough niche for sure.
I know. Yeah, I like a good challenge.
Yeah, well, you got one.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so let's hear a little bit about you. Where'd you grow up, and how did you get to where you are today?
Military brat. So my dad was in the military, lieutenant colonel in the Air Force. So bounced around a lot as a kid. Changed high schools 2 or 3 times, elementary schools 2 or 3 times, and so I was a kid that always had to try to fit in and make friends fast. And then, I'd have to do it again 2 years later. And so I think that's really helped me in my entrepreneurial journey. But I was different than my mom and dad in a sense that they were both government employees. And I saw that life as something that wasn't super attractive to me. And I had a ROTC scholarship to get into the military. And I called my dad and I said, Dad, I really don't want to do this. And he said, do whatever you want to do. And so I always had a vision of starting my own business, and I had a problem with authority, which I think my dad was like, yeah, you should probably not go in the military
because it doesn't work out well.
Yeah, you've been a challenge basically for me, so you're probably gonna be a challenge for someone else in the military. And so I wanted to start a business early. I opened a couple of small businesses in college and really enjoyed that. And then I took a job at a startup right out of college because I did not want to work at a big company. So as a 5th employee at a company called Goosehead Insurance. Took Goosehead from 5 to 150 people, was the number 2 guy there, managing the entire service, created the service team, managed it, which is the core of their business today. Recruited all my best friends from childhood into the business. I'm like, you guys have to come work here. This is amazing. And they all came, and then I left.
You were that guy.
But they took the company public, and it's a multi-billion-dollar company, so they, I think they're okay.
Yeah.
But I was like there for 3.5 years and going, I don't want to do this. I told him I could probably do 5 years, and this is like me coming out, young guy out of college, like setting my own terms. I'm like, I want to own my own business 5 years from now. He said, perfect. I'm going to take this company public. But I couldn't last 5 years. So I was ready to strike out on my own and started the Gent's Place in 2008.
So what was it that was inside of you or in the thought process that you said, all right, I'm going to do 5 years here, right? 5 years, I'm young. That's not a huge, amount of time, but you hit that 3-year mark and you're like, I'm out. I can't do this anymore. What was it?
So I have 3 kids. At the time, my middle son was 6 months old when I left. And I'll back up to when he was born, which is really what caused me on that to be on that path. He was born and he had a congenital heart defect that we did not know about. Was actually discharged from the hospital. Ooh. My wife was not discharged, and that saved his life. So my wife had a C-section. So while we're waiting on my wife to be discharged, doc comes in and says, there's an issue with your son. We're going to run some more tests. And he had some major heart defects. Ended up having a 12-hour open heart surgery that saved his life. And we're about a week into him being in the hospital post-surgery. And of course, he's in the NICU, and this is going to be however long it's going to be. And my boss called me, and he was gracious enough to come to the hospital and see Pierce and everything. But Friday came around, and he said, how's Pierce doing? And I'm like, he's alive, which is good. He said, when are you thinking about coming back to work? And I just remember just silence on the phone because I hadn't thought about work.
Right.
And so I said, gosh, Mark, I haven't really thought about that. And he said, how about Monday? And I just remember hanging up the phone and telling my wife, I'm like, I'm done. Can't do it. I already had plans to start my own business, but this was like, I'm not going to let somebody control my life and my destiny and everything that I want to do. And I just felt like and I was making a ton of money. The company was very successful, more money than I could imagine at 24 years old. But I just felt like these golden handcuffs coming on when I heard that. I was probably feeling that before,
right.
But people ask, when was that moment? That was it for me. That was December. And 6 months later in June, I walked in his office and said, I'm out of here.
Wow. It's funny how, whenever I do talk to entrepreneurs, for a lot of them, there is that moment. Not for all of them, but there's that seminal moment or seminal conversation, or even they just see something and they're like, now is the time. And wow, that's interesting. So you've been an entrepreneur since basically high school, it sounds like.
Almost, yeah.
Or college.
Yeah, college.
What were your first couple of businesses?
I started a coffee business in Austin. So I went to UT Austin and started this mobile coffee business. So we were at the convention center all the time and kind of just schlepping that thing around and making things work. Nice cash business. As when cash still existed.
Yeah,
for
and
people
you paid all of your taxes, of course.
Of course, yes, of course. Some people don't even know what cash is. I don't think my kids even understand what that is.
Yeah.
And then we started a marketing card called Local Focal. So it was like a discount card of sorts where you could get discounts at local businesses. So, both of them made some amount of money. It wasn't enough to pay for UT college.
Right.
But it was something that I was doing concurrently and it was getting good grades at school and learning something. But I was, I knew from a pretty early age, like I was going to eventually have to do my own thing. Like I was just not wired, I think, to work a 9-to-5, bank job.
That is so beneficial to know that early on. So many people always have that itch, and it takes them 5, 10, 15, 20 years in some sort of a corporate career or bigger business to say, you know what? Yeah, I actually am wired to be an entrepreneur, but it's that fear, right? The fear of the unknown. Getting that start early on where who cares if you screw up a coffee business or a discount card business? At the end of the day, it's not like you have a whole lot put into that, but you get those failures out of the way and you start to learn those super important lessons.
Yeah.
So what were the super important lessons that, if you recall, that you started learning with the coffee business and the discount card business?
I haven't been asked that question before. I'm trying to think back. I think probably the biggest lesson for me was that I was cut out for that. It wasn't an experience where I said I couldn't imagine doing that the rest of my life. It was like a steroid shot. It was a high. I loved like getting the coffee cart in there and selling the coffee and ordering the coffee. And there was a local coffee roaster and being part of that whole process of selecting the coffee and then leaving with money in your hands and creating something from nothing. So I think for me, it's like probably one of the lessons is, and it's been a strength and a weakness, is I like to create something from nothing, from pixie dust. Like I'm probably not the guy, that, I saw a job ad that said, we'll pay you this ungodly amount of money to take a company from $100 million to $1 billion. It just doesn't seem very exciting to me. It's already built. It's already done. I want to do something that no one's ever done before and no one's ever seen before. And so maybe that's it for me, is like I just realized, this is what I should be doing. And I passed up all the big job offers. And I remember interviewing with Mark Jones at Goosehead. And I said, well, I don't want to sell insurance. He goes, good. That's not what this company's about. It's about all this and this and this, and it's growing a business. You're going to get your honorary Harvard MBA working for me. And I said, okay, I'd like to start my own business in 5 years. And he said, perfect. And I remember I did interview with one big company, with Mercer Consulting. And I'll never forget this because I interviewed with them, and it's a case kind of study interview, all of these management consulting firms. And they were on the smaller side. So I'm like, well, what the heck? I'll interview with them. And I did the interview, and I'm like, I aced the case. And I get a phone call, and he said, hey, we're declining you. Would you like some feedback? I was like, yeah, sure. He said, you told us in the interview you had no plans to stay at the company longer than a couple of years.
You're like, yeah, I'm being honest.
Yeah, they're like, what's your vision for yourself the next 2 years? Start a business. What about 5 years? Like, have a bigger business. 10 years, have a bigger business. And so he's like, you probably, if you're trying to get a job, you probably shouldn't tell your employer that. And I was like, sorry, I was just being honest.
That's hilarious. But yet it didn't stop you from saying the exact same thing to the Goosehead guy.
No, and he took it, and I go, this is a match made in heaven.
Yeah. And I think that's a huge lesson, right? For anyone looking for a job, especially those new out of school or those new into finding a career, is be honest, right? First, figure out what it is that you want, and then be honest. And you know what? You didn't end up at Mercer, and you'd have been miserable there.
Totally miserable.
And so, know what you want, and then don't be afraid to tell people that.
Yeah. Yeah, and I remember calling my dad, and Goosehead was nothing. Once it was called Texas Wasatch Group, so this really funny name from Utah.
Wasatch?
Wasatch. So it's the Wasatch Mountains in Utah, which I'd never heard of before. So it's this funny name. They have like 4 people working there. Spent all this money going to this great business school, one of the best business schools in the country. Could have gone and worked at any of these big companies. I remember calling my dad going, when I walked out of that interview, and Mark's a huge guy, like 300 pounds, he ran after me. So I get done with my interview, and I'm walking through the atrium, and I call my dad, and I said, I just had this interview. I think it went really well. And I go, hold on, Dad, let me call you back. And Mark is running. He said, hey, get back in here. I want to give you an offer now. And so I go, okay. And so I called my dad and I said, hey, this man ran after me. That's why I had to go. He just gave me an offer. What do you think I should do? And he's like, look, if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. It's okay. And so with my kids, we talk a lot like amongst entrepreneur group, like, are you sending your kids to college? You force them to go to college? I haven't met a single person that says, They have to go to college. They have to do this unless they want to be an attorney.
Yeah.
They want to be a medical doctor or something. They say, otherwise, I'm not going to force them to do anything because things have changed. So as a dad, I'm trying to be, keep all these lanes open, not push them into anything, because my dad giving me that feedback, me having that job, getting my honorary Harvard MBA, which I really felt like I did, set me up for the rest of life. He could have very much said, son, you need to go to one of these big companies where you have a good salary and insurance and everything else, and take the safe path. And I don't know, I probably wouldn't have listened to him, but
but he didn't do that, right? And,
No.
and that was his career, right? He was the safe path the whole way through.
yes.
I think it's so interesting how things have changed in one generation.
Yeah.
Right. Whenever I was growing up, it wasn't, it wasn't if you wanted to go to college, it was where, because
Yeah.
the expectation was, no, you're going to college. Right. Obviously, it worked out for me because I would have had to go anyway. But especially with entrepreneurs, especially now, I see that mentality so much more of, okay, you don't have to go to college. If you do go to college, maybe wait a couple of years, go try to work for a little bit. Because I know for me, had I gone to college after being in the workforce for a couple of years, I probably would have approached it a lot differently. Right. I don't know how you were in college or in business school, but without having that work experience, I probably did. I don't want to say I didn't take it seriously enough, but I would have gotten different things out of it for sure. I think more value out of it.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, our middle son, the one with the heart surgery, he's just had his 4th open heart surgery 2 months ago.
Oh,
Played in
man.
his first basketball game this week, 2 months after heart surgery. Which
So
is
great.
Amazing. But he said, I'm thinking about, taking a year, like this gap year, but it's not like a traditional go and, backpack in Europe. It's trying to figure out what he really likes to do, because I think going to college is great, but if you could go with some purpose, like I figured out I want to be an attorney. I figured out I'm really good at engineering or have an interest in this, versus going straight from high school to college and then you change majors 7 times and then you end up saying, give me the major that gets me out of here fast, which is what my wife did. She's like,
Human studies.
yeah, sociology, the study of people. She's like, I like people. That sounds good. But, she gets out of college and she has a sociology degree. And, she was interested in fashion, all these other things. So I agree with that having some purpose, even if it's not taking a gap year, but starting in high school, is if you're going to go to college, why? What do you want to do there? Right? What do you want to study? Why do you want to study that? Why do you think that's, the right fit for you? And asking some of these questions to try to get some direction.
Yeah. And for me, it was, I got to get that piece of paper. That's the stepping stone, right? That's the next step in the journey. Even if I have zero idea where that journey's headed. I wanted to be a doctor. I went to Baylor, and my first semester I made all A's and a D, and the D was in biology. So that dream was quickly smashed. But yeah, I kind of fell backwards into law school. But I was a psychology major. My wife was a psychology major. Neither of us used those degrees, but we have the college degree. And I think getting that real world experience. Look, at 18 years old, you may think you want to know what you may think you know what you want to do, but man, you have zero experience.
Yeah.
And my oldest, Emma, wants to go to, she wants to be a teacher. And so obviously she needs a degree. And so I think that's amazing. She's looking at potentially working with special ed kids. My son has autism and they get along amazingly, and it's really kind of made an impact on her. And so she's looking at doing that. And, we're encouraging her, hey, that's fantastic. Go take a bunch of different electives to see what else, you can get while you're there. Obviously, you got to check the education box. Actually, I don't even think you have to do that anymore. I think you can major in whatever you want to and then kind of get your teaching certificate at the end of that. But yeah, we're encouraging her. She's a really talented artist. She's crocheting. She is very musically inclined. She plays the flute. And so we're like, go pursue all this stuff and see if maybe there's a passion there that you can find before you run off to college and go major in that.
Yeah, and teaching is such a wide net. And my wife had a brief stint in New York. So she went to FIT, I went to NYU, I transferred out of UT into NYU, back to UT. But she thought she wanted to be in fashion. And she had an idea of what the fashion industry was. She gets to FIT, which is top fashion school in the entire country. And her professors are like, yeah, I sold women's hosiery. This is a man saying, I sold women's hosiery for 20 years and I put my time in and then I got the job I really wanted. And she's going, oh my gosh. Like
20 years of your life.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's like fashion was this big wide net. She didn't realize, how it worked. In teaching, it's like, okay, you want to do teaching? Well, do you want to be an art teacher? Do you want to be a special ed teacher? Do you want to teach history? Do you want to teach young kids? Do you want to teach middle school? Do you want to teach high school? Because I know I had teachers that in my life that clearly hated their job.
Yes, I think we all had those. We were the last year before they just quit the profession entirely.
That's right? Yeah. Yeah. So I agree with you.
So tell me this. You obviously are an entrepreneur by heart. You talk to a lot of entrepreneurs.
Mm-hmm.
What is a trait or a characteristic that you think a lot of people wouldn't deem as super important who are looking at becoming entrepreneurs?
So a characteristic that they need to have that they may not think they need to have.
Exactly.
Yeah. I was thinking about this morning about perseverance. Like most people who start things quit them in life, and so you just can't do that as an entrepreneur. You can't dabble and try something. And so I think those that have, if it's this military discipline background, military father, or some sort of work ethic that was instilled in them, for them to say, if I decide to start something, I will finish it. It will be done.
Right.
The entrepreneurs that I've seen be really successful, they're just like, it will be done.
Right.
Like it has to be done. And so even if you're creative, I bring my wife up a lot because like we've been together since we were 16 years old and we've done business together and everything, but we're different. She's very creative. She has the ideas. And then the execution piece, she struggles with and like staying with something.
Yeah.
And so she's like, well, I'm just going to create an idea shop. And that's going to be my business.
Fantastic. All right. How are you going to operate that?
I'll never have to. Exactly, right? I'll never have to execute anything. Well, what about the finish out of the space and the lease? And then, it's a 5-year lease. You can do this for 5 years. Well, I don't know if I'll do it for 5 years, right?
Exactly.
So yeah, I think there's all kinds of entrepreneurs that, that I've met and they're all different, but the common theme for like a successful one is they have some characteristic, could be innate, could be learned, where they will, and it could be pride. I mean, there's all kinds of things driving it. Like I'm not going to be a failure in front of other people, or this is just what I do. I have work ethic instilled in me. I would say that's it. So, I mean, if you have that and you have a passion for something
right,
that's not going to wear out, and marrying those two things together, like eventually if you are passionate about it, you stay with it, eventually you're pretty likely to be really good at it, maybe the best, right? From a competitive standpoint, you probably make a business out of it.
And I think that the part that really ties into that you mentioned is, look, man, you got to be disciplined, right? The motivation is going to run out. Your passion is going to wane at times. But being an entrepreneur is 10% really cool and fun and exciting, and probably 90% just toughing it out, doing the same thing over and over and being consistent. If you can't maintain the consistency, you're probably not going to succeed.
Yeah. So it's too hard.
It's hard.
Yeah.
It's the hardest job you'll ever love, right? And you give a lot of blood, sweat, and tears to be able to not have to report to somebody else. Yeah. And for some people it's worth it, and for a whole lot it's not.
Yeah. I was having a conversation yesterday with a guy that sold his company for $82 million, and he's a brilliant guy and one of kind of our partners in a different venture. And they went to pickleball championship and they got second place, and they're really proud of that. And I said, oh, I love pickleball. And we started talking about golf, and do you play golf? And I said, no, it's a complete waste of time for me. And he's like, what do you mean? I said, I can't imagine spending 5 hours away from my business, not because my business needs me to be there, but because I love it so much.
Yeah.
I couldn't imagine like wasting my time playing golf. And it's very contrary. And I'm going to put out a video on this, and I'm sure I'll make a bunch of people mad. But for me, I love doing what I do so much that I couldn't imagine taking it like 5 hours off. Pickleball, for an hour, it's a great workout. I'll do it. Basketball, I played basketball this morning. For an hour, I'll do it. And so he said, And he's a very nice man, very wise man, wealthy. And he said, that's how you're doing the right thing. Is you won't even play golf with me.
Like, and I'm not very good, but that's beside the point. All right. So tell us, how did you start the Gent's place?
Yeah. So it started in 2008. So that was
great economic times.
It was horrible. Son was born December 2007 with heart problems. Walk into my boss's office, June. He tells me I can't leave because the company needs me and we need to make some transitions and everything like that. So I built my business plan during that time. Got an SBA loan 2 weeks before Lehman Brothers collapsed, September 2008. So I got it approved. Lehman collapses 2 weeks later. I'm leaving the insurance company, and my banker calls me and says, hey, you need to start spending your money. And I'm like, oh, we're going to start construction in a month and we're going to be open by December. And he said, no, you don't understand. Lehman Brothers just collapsed, the largest bankruptcy in history, still today. Hurry up and spend the money before we take it back from you. I'm like, Brad, you can do that? And he goes, man, the whole world's falling apart. And so I sent my contractor a $50,000 invoice, or asked him to send me a $50,000 invoice, sent him a $50,000 wire to trigger the loan to get it open.
Yeah.
And so I was, basically an insurance guy, right? From all looks. I had no experience in the hair business. I had no experience in retail. I'd never built a space out. I'd never signed a commercial lease. I was 25 years old. I had, 2 kids at the time, one with major heart problems. And I ended up opening the Gent's place day one, the day of my son's second open heart surgery.
Oh my gosh.
Not in the plans to do that, but I had sold over $10,000 worth of gift cards before we opened. I had these signs on the door because I needed money. And so we sold all these gift cards, and we were delayed on opening. And so I have all these guys calling me going, hey, give me my money back if you're not going to open on time. I've been waiting to get my hair cut. And so we opened with cold water. And I'm like, guys, there's cold water. Like, we don't care, right? Just open. And I worked the front desk all day in Frisco, and then drove to Fort Worth to be with my wife and my son after his heart surgery. So it was a crazy time. I had all these guys come to me afterwards, after I'm quote successful, going, man, I was telling people there's no way you were going to make it.
Yeah.
All these businesses were closing around us. What a crazy idea. You had no experience. We saw this young kid working the front desk. He has no idea what he's doing. It's a terrible economy. So it was kind of fun to hear that,
Yeah.
So I wish you would have told me that before, because that motivates me, right? Tell me I can't do something and I'll prove you wrong. But that time was absolutely crazy. And I wouldn't, when you're coaching entrepreneurs or talking to people, I don't know if I would give that advice, right? If someone was in my same situation. My boss told me, you're crazy.
Yeah.
He's a Harvard MBA, multi-billionaire now, great, smart guy. And he's like, you're going to do what? Do you know how much money you're making here? Do you know the trajectory we're on? And you're going to do a haircut business? Ben, you have no experience in this. What about your son's health insurance? And I just remember telling him, I'll figure it out. I'm done. I'll figure it out, Mark. I'll figure it out. So I don't know if it was the smartest thing to do, but it worked.
So many entrepreneurs I know, me included. Looking back, if I was able to tell Scott from 2008, hey, you don't know anything about this, there's no way on earth I would have ever left, the good paying law firm gig that I had.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think naivety can be a real blessing at times, so long as it's not over the top where you just have zero idea what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
But with the right personality, I think that really helps push you off that ledge.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I was going back to earlier, I was committed to making it work. I had no money. I had to go ask my grandmother for a down payment on the SBA loan that we got. That was this, woman's SBA loan that my wife and I started the business, and she was doing the design, I was doing the business stuff. I was not going to make a fool out of myself. I was going to prove my boss wrong, that I was right and I did this for a reason. I was going to be successful. And so I had a lot riding on me. I didn't have a lot to lose from a money standpoint because it was like, well, if this doesn't work, I can go get a job. I can pay off the SBA loan, all of that. But I think it was like, pride and proving something to everybody else that just caused me to stick with it. Like I'll be damned if I'm going to lose on this one.
Yeah. So what was the generating idea for the Gent's place?
Yeah, I hated getting my hair cut. That was like the main thing. So, I think step one was I'm no longer going to work at this current company. Like that, I knew that. Okay, so you have to work for a living and you're going to not work somewhere else. So you got to start your own business. So you got to start a business. What business are you going to start? Flip open the franchise magazine. This is overwhelming. There's like 5,000 different places.
Right.
But I realized through that journey that I hated getting my hair cut and I hated going to the grocery store. And I avoided both at all costs. I'd get my hair cut twice as short as I wanted, so I wouldn't have to go back for twice as long. And I just wouldn't go to the grocery store. It's the most miserable experience ever. Grocery stores, millions of dollars, low margins. I have no idea what's going on there. But I started seeing all these higher end men's grooming concepts pop up. And I was like, okay, well, I'll just buy into one of these franchises. So I went and interviewed at franchises. And I remember going into one in particular, still around, and they just started franchising. The franchisee was showing me around. So you kind of do like, oh, you're interested in franchising? Meet our first franchisee. He's going to tell you how great everything is. And he was walking me around the location. He's like, hey, you can't tell this isn't a real leather chair, can you? I'm like, no, I can't. He goes, yeah, I got this at Target, and franchisor so-and-so wants me to order real leather, but I mean, that's insane. That's $1,000. It's $100. And he's walking me through the whole concept. I'm thinking, oh no, I can't buy into this. Like, this guy is doing whatever he wants.
Exactly.
Right? And I don't want to be associated with him. And so I made this decision pretty thoughtfully of like, okay, I could pay $35,000 franchise fee and 6% of sales to franchisor and be beholden to them and how they want to do business, be associated with people that I don't want to be associated with. Or I could make $35,000 in mistakes and 6% of sales in perpetuity. Same economics, but this one I'd be able to do whatever I want with. And so I was thinking, well, this is a pretty easy decision for me. I'm in the franchising business, so it's not like the most compelling story. Our franchisees are going, whoa, maybe I should do that too.
Exactly.
But I'm wired differently than a traditional franchisee. Franchisees are not traditional entrepreneurs, or if they're good franchisees, they really shouldn't be.
Yeah.
Wired.
Follow
like
the
that.
script. It works.
They should go out and start their own business. Most franchisees are saying, I want to own my own business. I want a good system in place. I want some security. I want to be able to maybe still do my day job and still do this. And so we're a great fit for them. So that's part of our weeding out process at the Gent's place is like, hey, you sound like me, and so you're not a good fit here. Like, you should go open Frank's place, not the Gent's place.
Exactly. Yeah. And so I think that's so funny too, because so many people want to be a business owner, but they don't have that drive, right? They don't want to learn the marketing and the operations, and they don't know anything about it. And so a franchise would be perfect for them. We had Roxanne Rapsky, who specializes in matching people up with different franchises.
Oh, yeah.
And so like they do personality tests and, hey, what are you interested in? And how involved do you want to be? And all that kind of stuff. But for the true entrepreneur, it seems like that's basically 1B in terms of things that you don't want to do, right? If you can't buy different things or add services or play whatever you want on the TV, okay, well, I don't want to be in that situation because I know my customers and I know what's going to make things better, and I want to be able to do those things.
Yes. Yeah. It's totally different person. And it is, I'm glad there are people like that are helping the person do the diligence, because they may come to them saying, I want to be an entrepreneur. And what they're really saying is, I want to be a business owner, and I need a good system in place that will help me be successful. Because entrepreneurs are like, we're a pretty crazy bunch of people that, like, we like to create something from nothing. Other people look at that and go, that's really stressful. Why would you ever want to do that? Like, we actually want to like grow and sell a company. Like, why would you want to do that? And so it is, it's a challenge in franchising in particular to try to figure out what type of person are you working with. And sometimes you make a good call and sometimes you don't. And so it's a fun process. It's a challenging process, but I had completely endorsed franchising for that particular person that you're talking about.
Okay, so tell me this: you have the original Gent's place in Frisco off Lebanon. At what point do you say, "Hey, this is actually going really well. This is working. I want to either look at starting another location or potentially franchise this"?
Yeah, my story is a little crazy, and so I remember talking to Patrick.
That seems to be a theme here.
Yeah, I know. Crazy. There's this, crazy and wise, are like within a 2 millimeter difference, right?
Does it work or not? That's the difference.
Yeah. Sometimes you get lucky and you're called wise, and that's all it was. My journey was kind of crazy. I talked to Patrick, who owned La Madeleine, and he had this concept called the fast snail approach. And so he said, Ben, what you need to do is open as many locations as close as possible to each other. So every corner you drive around and people are like, man, La Madeleine is everywhere. Instead of growing geographically. And he said, I made a mistake because my second location was in Florida and it failed. And so I retreated back and I pursued fast snail. Well, he was telling me that because my second location was in Kansas. And so he's cautioning me going, don't do that anymore. There was a guy that had failed in his business, opened up a similar business, called me, and we ended up acquiring the location, became our most successful location for several years. That move, though, and it was very risky. The way I structured it, though, I didn't put a bunch of money in. The existing investors put money in, but that gave me the confidence to scale the business nationally because I had to create SOPs. I had to create basically a franchise system.
Yeah,
I wasn't going to be there all the time. I needed everyone doing what they should be doing without me present, and so it forced me to create these systems, and then gave me the confidence to say, I could franchise because basically that's what I'm doing right now.
Yeah.
So it'd be a lot easier because these people will live in the community and can actually go there. If I can make that thing work, they can make this thing work. So that was it. So it was another lucky phone call, lucky break, a lot of hard work. I moved up there in the most awful, I don't even call it a hotel. I don't know if it was a motel. It was the most awful place. I don't want to mention it by name because I think it's still open. But I moved up there for 5 weeks. I told my wife, I said, I've got to figure this thing out. And so I moved up there for 5 weeks, got to know the staff, fired some people, hired some people, and got a good group in place and made it work.
Wow. What is one thing that you have learned since being an entrepreneur that you were just really bad at?
I think going back to what I'm really good at, which is just creation.
Mm-hmm.
This is the strength is like I can see things that other people don't see and create something from nothing. The downside or the dark side of that is if you like to create, if you need to go deep into something, do the same thing or not do anything new, no new product line, no new business, no anything else, is keep what you've got and just get better at all of it. That's where it's a struggle for me. And I'm not the CEO to 100 to a billion and come in and optimize and make everything 10% better and fine tune. And businesses need that in order to be really successful. And so for me, I've had to surround myself with people that like that.
Yeah.
They're like, oh, Ben, he's crazy. He has all these crazy ideas, but I love executing those ideas, right? I keep them coming because I want to try to make this thing work. And so it's a struggle, man. It's still every day I have to discipline myself. And I even told Lauren, my wife, I was like, okay, 2024, I'm going to have this, tagline. I'm going to tell everybody, nothing new, only better. And she's like, oh, that's great. Because she gave me this feedback recently. And I'm like, nothing new, only better, nothing new. That's what I'm going to put the marketing team on it. We're going to launch it internally. And then I was like, man, I had this guy approach me about a Gent's med spa, thing and this offering. And like all of our guys are getting Botox and testosterone and all. And they keep asking me to do like a Gent's Plus version of like, why don't you do, we're all getting this. Can you put something in the location or close by? And so I ended up sending this survey out and we got like 1,000 people to respond. And sure enough, 89% of all of our Gent's Place members that are currently receiving men's health and wellness services said they would switch. either somewhat likely or very likely to switch. Service is over. So then I'm like, I have to go home and say, I think we should try this med spa thing out, like pilot it in one location. She's going, nothing new, only better. I go, yeah, but that's 2024. It's 2023 right now.
Yeah, exactly. I still have 2 months.
I still have a month and a half to a couple months to create. So yeah, it's probably an Achilles heel that I need to continue to manage.
But is it, right? Because that's where you thrive. That's your superpower. And so why would you, self-impose restraints and not do those things that you're amazing at?
Yeah. I think the answer to that is, and I hope to get in a different position in my company, is when you have someone who's just as good at you at executing and optimizing, then I think that's where the magic is. And Randy DeWitt is a close friend of mine. So Randy started Rockfish. He founded Twin Peaks, Whiskey Cake, Ojos Locos, Legacy Food Hall, Mexican Sugar, 60 Vines, Front Burner Restaurants is the concept, Son of a Butcher, Velvet Taco. These are all Randy's ideas.
Wow. Those are all big names around here.
Right. This is like one man's idea of how to grow a restaurant concept. But he's got two
the next version of Phil Romano.
Yeah. And he's incredible, but he has COO for years and years and years and years, and CFO, same thing. And it's like these three guys have figured out their roles, and Randy creates ideas, and I'm sure they're vetted heavily and everything, but he's got the team to execute. So I'm working towards that position for me, is like, if I can find someone that's just as good at what they do as what I do, but I am having to step in and also help, drive some of what's in the SOPs and all of that. I've got a great team, a growing team, but that's where I think you could say, I'm just going to create all day. Like that would be fairy tale land for me.
And, I read the book Who Not How a couple of years ago now, and it just completely changed my perspective on the team that we surround ourselves with, right? Because I have certain things I'm really good at, I think, and a lot of things that I'm not. And so instead of trying to improve those things that I'm not, why would I not just hire someone who's really good at those things? And then that way I can just focus on the things that I'm good at. And I think that goes straight to your point of, once you have that team around you, then there's just no stopping you.
Yeah.
At all.
Yeah.
All right. So I am getting the logo that we are almost out of time. So tell me this: top 3 favorite books. Business, nonfiction, doesn't matter.
The Alchemist, I've read many, many times. Benjamin Franklin's biography by Walter Isaacson.
Okay.
America's First Entrepreneur.
Yeah.
Is, Benjamin Franklin.
Of course, that would be your favorite past president, right?
I've got a shared name there. So.
Yeah, there you go.
I think I haven't read it in a long time, but I know Good to Great was transformational for me. I was still at the insurance company at the time, and I think that's kind of my mantra, as being my best. I couldn't imagine being in business and not being great, being settled with good and just understanding that distinction. I think was really helpful. Yeah.
Good old flywheel.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, Ben, thank you so much for being here. Really appreciate your time. And thank you to everyone for tuning in to the Driven Crowd podcast. We'll see you next time.